Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss Brexit in a nutshell. Another expensive white elephant that the government have abandoned. On this occasion, the fool's errand of developing our own GPS satellite system completely in-house, when we were already paying much less to be part of a more advanced version. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Boris Johnson's government are in another desperate situation due to their blinkered approach to Brexit. The Conservative government, from the moment they triggered the process of leaving the EU, have been determined to engage in an Orwellian concept of doublethink. In this particular case, it is to say that we would become global Britain, but a global Britain that wanted nothing whatsoever to do with the hefty section of the globe occupied by our immediate neighbours. Now, to this end, they insisted on pulling out of cooperation with the EU on a whole range of very visible projects, and that was increased to basically all projects when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. Now, one of these was the EU's Galileo Project for GPS satellites, navigation satellites. And while the Prime Minister at the time was Theresa May when we started on this, and she pumped out a load of public money to start the ball rolling to develop our own version of this. Now, before I would even need to consult with space engineers in the UK, which I have done on a number of occasions, for my more professional duties, the concept itself just seemed odd because we were already part of a project to do this, and given that the project was Europe-wide, all we were going to be doing then is contributing to the costs, not having to stump up the money for the whole thing. How did it make sense to reinvent the wheel, develop our own system and pay for all of it, as opposed to have a system that's already fairly advanced and pay part of it to get the full benefits? The only possibility where it could have made any sense at all, if ours was going to be better in some way, if it was going to be a superior, more ambitious project. But for that to happen, you would have to suppose that the EU were deliberately assembling Galileo on a shoestring due to low ambition. Well, this project's already cost £9 billion, and our contribution was £1.2 billion, which actually, when you consider the size of the UK economy compared to the EU at large, that was a pretty good deal. It was a really good deal, in fact. So, by definition, if we're going to suggest that we were going to come up with a grander project, a much better, bolder project, then it would also cost much more. And then not only would we have to pay as much as the EU are paying completely, we'd have to pay much more because it'd be a bigger project, much more expensive for us as well. But it seems we didn't have a bigger project in mind. In fact, it seemed to be a smaller project. The government have now formally abandoned that project, by the way, as unfeasible. Can't be worked. Just like we dropped Dominic Cummings' madcap tracing app scheme that cost a lot of public money for exactly zero return for us. Probably paid for quite a lot of posh lunches for Cummings and his drinking buddies, of course. And just to be clear about what developing our own version would mean for a navigation system. So the projected cost for the one we were going to develop ourselves was somewhere between £3 and £5 billion, which is significantly less than the EU version, which, as I say, is not evidence at all that we would be designing a bigger, better system, but actually a smaller, more modest system. So now what we're trying to argue is, okay, we want to spend £3 to £5 billion on a system that's not as good as the one we were spending £1.2 billion for. So, because our contribution to Galileo was £1.2 billion. That's the figure to focus on. So we'd be paying, potentially 4 times as much for a less sophisticated version of what the EU are developing, where we're also significantly behind in the development cycle as well. And what would have been the reason for this? So it's not that we were planning a bigger, grander project, because that's evidently not the case. The reason was simply Brexit. And I don't mean Brexit in itself as a concept, because this has got nothing to do with leaving the EU. It hasn't even got anything to do with having a hard Brexit. We could still have remained involved in certain aspects of the EU and pulled out of others. We could have enjoyed full access to Galileo with our stake in the project. No, the reason is Brexit mentality. That we must have no connection with the EU at all. Not just leave and sever all ties, burn all bridges. That, it's bad enough that we're even on the same continent as the EU, quite frankly. No doubt Dominic Cummings has tasked one of his weirdos to build a massive outboard motor to put on the east coast of Britain and shove us nearer America. Can't wait to see how much that's going to cost. So now the government have a problem. Developing our own system is dead in the water. There are those in Whitehall, and people picked up on this, there are those in Whitehall, civil servants basically, who are pushing for us to rejoin the Galileo Project. Now, you may have seen mention on social media, various prominent commentators who are saying, oh, look, the government are now, they've abandoned this project and they're going to go back to Galileo, or they're going to try and go back to Galileo. No, that's not what's happening. And that's not what they're going to do. And it was reckless for people to try and suggest that. Because if the government were to do that, they would look like right tits. Their egos have already been battered in recent months. There is no way they're going to crawl back from this anti-EU stance in such a public way. In a few areas, yeah, I absolutely expect, in fact, it's evident we've seen it. Because there are some things we were also supposed to be developing ourselves and we can't. Various businesses are asking, so what are our rules going to be for this, that and the other, and we haven't got them. So what the government are saying is they're going to be very similar to the EU rules. What they mean is they're going to be exactly the same as the EU rules. By saying very similar, it's like, oh, we've come up with our own, but they're basically the same. No, you haven't come up with your own, that's the thing, isn't it? You're using the EU systems and rules and regulations and just copying their agencies. So, yeah, but this would involve, if they went back to Galileo or even tried to renegotiate entry back into Galileo, that would be a very public crawling back to the EU. Not going to do that. Maybe in the future, certainly not now. So where does that leave us? We can't develop our own system. That's been knocked on the head. That's been formally abandoned. We're not going to go back to Galileo because, Brexit mentality and not wanting to look like a tit. So that just leaves us with those dodgy satellites that Dominic Cummings got the government to buy from a company that had one of its operations go bankrupt. And we didn't even buy a controlling stake. It's like 45% our stake in it. The rest of it's an Indian stake. So as far as I can tell, we can't actually determine the way the company operates. If our partners in this, our Indian partners, decide they want something completely different. So the design of the satellites from this bankrupt company that was desperate for cash, that makes satellites that are different to the ones we need. As some may know, like I said, this company that we bought doesn't make navigation satellites. It makes satellites for broadband. That's where its expertise lies. And remember, making satellites for which it has expertise, it didn't succeed as a business. Part of it went bankrupt. So they're the wrong satellites. And someone who understands nothing of satellite technology is the only sort of person that could possibly have made such a mistake. Enter Dominic Cummings, history graduate. Essentially, what happened was you had a company that had one of its operations go bankrupt. It was in trouble, needed cash to bail it out really quickly. So they went to Dominic Cummings to talk about an idea. Oh, I see you've got a bit of a problem. You need to develop your own satellite system. That's really expensive. Do it from the ground up, really expensive, take you a lot of time. We already make satellites. What you need to do is to buy into our company. Oh, said Cummings, no doubt. Oh, do you make those sorts of satellites? No, I'm sure they replied. But, we could probably change our designs to do that. I mean, it's all satellites, isn't it, Mr. Cummings? Yeah, I suppose it is, really. Good enough for me. I'll get my monkey to buy you out. Boris, bring your checkbook. Essentially, for political purposes, the government may keep dangling the idea that it has a stake in a satellite company and we want to build a satellite network in pursuit of developing this sort of UK GPS. But this failed company with expertise in a wholly unsuitable satellite can't possibly do the job, their satellites. Can't possibly do the job. They can't hold the atomic clocks needed to do the job. apart from anything else. They're not designed to be in the same sort of orbit. So they're not going to be the answer. They'll dangle it because a lot of people don't understand satellites. But they're not the answer. One day, the government will have to admit that. And they'll also have to admit that they have no use at all for these satellites. Because that's another... I've no doubt they're going to try and think, well, can we at least use these satellites for something? They won't. Just as they've had to admit to making our own from scratch is not going to work either. They've already admitted that. Until then, until that day comes, then Boris Johnson, or no doubt his successor, will just hypnotise us with tales of all the wonderful things that Brexit is going to bring us. Yes, they're not here yet, but soon. Any century now and it'll all be magical. Just you wait and see. But there we go. Those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.